What I want to do before you leave today is I want everybody to be able to create a basic T table that matches your skills with the needed skills listed on the job description. Oops. And then the next thing I want to do is not do that. Okay. If you've done the T table before, please don't roll your eyes, because honestly, I'll make it worth your time. I'm going to pull it into the concept of specifically being an experienced worker and why that exercise is so important. Same way, too, I want you to be able to name the advantages of networking, because particularly for people who have experience, networking is vital. Tied together with all of this, and the next two bullet points kind of go hand in hand, understanding why it's important to, at times, leave off experience and qualifications that go beyond the company's needs, because that is one of the prime ways to avoid the pitfalls of being seen as overqualified. And then finally, talk a little bit about the successfully keeping the momentum of the job search going for as long as it takes. So I got my work cut out for me. Let's start though with good news, because I realize we've had so much bad news. Let's start with good news. But before we do that, before we get into that, I want you guys to participate a little bit. And I'm so pleased to see everybody was jumping on chat. I think a lot of people feel comfortable with the chat function. I want to do one more thing in chat before we get going. I want to hear from you guys real briefly in the chat box. And I want to hear from you in just one word. What I'd like you to do in the chat box right now is describe job searching over the age of 40 or 50 in just one word. So if somebody said, okay, describe the experience of looking for a job right now, what would it be? Oh, they're coming in, they're coming in, they're coming in. Don't use any words you wouldn't use in a professional interview. Okay. Oh my goodness, they are coming in, coming in, coming in. Yeah, I love it. One person says, okay, all right. I love it. I love it. I love it. All of these exciting, frustrating, overwhelming, depressing, unfair, challenging, invisible, unseen, brutal. Oh, wow. Okay. So these are all pretty much what I had guessed. Every now and then I do get somebody who's kind of glass half full and they say, opportunity is fun, this kind of thing. Here's the thing. None of these are wrong. All of these are totally and completely valid. And a lot of the ones that are feeling a little bit, as they say, frustrating or overwhelmed, I anticipated these. My hope, this is my goal for myself. Not that not that suddenly you're going to leave after 60 minutes of this and go, oh, I now can do it. Everything's perfect. No, I don't have that kind of power, and I don't think you assume that I do. But I hope that you will be able to leave today feeling a bit more empowered, so that you feel that maybe we've been able to take the edge off this a little bit. Okay? That's what I'm going to do. Okay? All right. So I promised you good news. Let's go into the good news so that we get at least a start on something. A recent article in the Harvard Business Review gave us some hopeful news that employers are now looking to experienced workers to help them through the current crisis. And the crisis continues because the challenges of rebuilding now are going to be huge. There are return to work programs now. Some of them are formal. They actually have a thing called returnships. And what returnships are basically internships, but they are for experienced workers. So, experienced workers, we don't have to start from scratch. We know a lot of the basics, but there's going to be little gaps in our experience that we need to deal with. And so those are called returnships. Also direct hire programs. But the point is that employers are saying that they are looking for people who, let's just say this is not their first rodeo, okay? Experienced workers can have the edge over their younger counterparts by bringing to the table things like institutional knowledge, education, work experience, mature perspective, stable life stage, dedication, loyalty, and energy and enthusiasm for returning to work. Now, here's the thing. Many older workers forget to promote their soft skills. And when I say soft skills, I'm talking about people skills. I'm talking about things like adaptability and emotional intelligence and mentoring and cool-headedness. And I think the reason we forget to promote those is simply because those are skills that come so naturally. We don't think of them as formal skills. But in reality, these skills are not always developed yet in younger workers, and employers are looking to fill that soft skill gap. You are going to have the edge over somebody who has spent their life communicating primarily electronically. And I could go on and on and on about that, but I don't have time. So reach out to me individually if you want to talk more about that. Okay, so the fact of the matter is there is interest out there. Now, we have to be able to harness that interest. So what we're going to talk about here in the next few minutes is what has changed since you last looked for work. Okay? So if you have been in the workforce for a significant amount of time, if you've been working in sustained employment for many years, if you have been out of work doing something else that you haven't been, it hasn't been a quote unquote formal job, you may find that resume writing, interviewing, and the job search itself has changed. It's important to remember that what used to work may or may not work now. Those of you who work in fields where employment changes often, so I'm talking mostly to folks like IT and that kind of thing, you might be aware of some of the things that I'm talking about here, but honestly, there's going to be things I'm going to be throwing you guys that are going to be helpful for you as well. So the thing about it is interviewing has changed drastically, and so there's going to be, there's going to be value here for you. So in this session, we're also going to be talking about the need to match your skills to the skills listed on the job, the vital importance of networking, which I would argue is easier now due to technology. And of course, we're going to be talking about teleconferencing. Now, I think at this point, as opposed to months ago when I was first doing this webinar, teleconferencing was a very foreign concept. Now, it probably still is for some of you, but we're going to cover some of that so that you feel hopefully a little bit more confident. What I'm hearing is there's a mixed bag. Some people are going into in-person interviews. Some people are still teleconferencing. So we're going to try to, cover everything. And then the last thing that has changed since you last went for a job is you yourself. Oftentimes, we don't give a lot of thought to how we ourselves have changed since the last time we've interviewed for a job. And that affects how we self-promote, both positively and negatively. So we're going to talk about that. Okay, very quickly, and as I said, I apologize, it sounds like I'm a steamroller here who's just going on. As you are listening, write in those questions because we are going to be working toward the question section. Okay, matching your skills to the skills listed. Now, as you probably already know, historically, resumes were written chronologically, and even some interviews were conducted chronologically. You listed the duties for your most recent job at the top, and then you worked your way down from there. Now, in this model, the responsibility was on the hiring manager to make a connection between what you've done before and what he or she wanted you to do now. Pretty much all accomplishments were considered important, even if they weren't directly relevant to the job being pursued. Now, little sidebar comment before I get too far over into this now. Chronological resumes are still being used in circumstances today. Okay, so they have not gone away. So please do not take away, oh my goodness, I have a chronological, it's automatically bad. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I would say is reach out to a Career Force staff member and ask them to help you decide which type of resume is the best for what you are trying to accomplish. The thing that's important right now is that employers want to see directly and quickly the actual experience and accomplishments that you have that relate directly to the skills listed on the job description and make you right for the company's needs. Now, one way you can do this is creating what is called a T-table or a T-chart. Now, keep in mind, if you haven't covered this yet, this exercise is not something that you are ever going to give to an employer. This is an exercise you do at home by yourself and gives you information to move forward. Okay, so literally this is something that you can do on a piece of paper and just write it out. So the first thing you do is you draw a big T on a piece of paper. Easily enough. Next, list the keywords from the job description on the left-hand column. So go through, and I literally will print out or I do this on my computer, either or. I will look at the job description and I will literally highlight the things that I can see that they want. Okay, they want, in this particular example, they want someone with experience recruiting team members, they want someone with experience as a human resources business partner, and they want someone to work with various departments to determine candidate needs. Next, write out your accomplishments or experiences that match those keywords and phrases. Okay? So, great. They want, neat tool, Robin. I love it. Absolutely. I love the T table. I actually learned it when I was unemployed and I sat in class and I thought, oh my goodness, this is what I've been waiting for. So they want someone with experience recruiting team members. Great. I've exceeded all recruitment goals by attending job fairs and sourcing applicants from various job boards. I want somebody with experience as a human resources business partner. Hooray! I'm PHR certified. And finally, I want someone to work with various departments to determine candidate skills. Great, I've collaborated with hiring managers in order to develop candidate profiles. So this is the big magic thing. Well, it's not really magic, but it's cool. That is frequently helpful when people are worried about being seen as overqualified. You notice that this is laser focused to you want this? Great, I have it. Here's how. You want this? Great, I have it. Here's how. You're not muddying the waters with accomplishments that you achieved at a higher level. You're keeping it focused. So they should be able to look at your resume and listen to you talk in the interview and go, why wouldn't I hire this person? This person has everything that I need. Okay? So we'll spend probably a little more time talking about that, fleshing that out in the question section. But I find that this is particularly helpful for experienced workers. Keep it focused to what they want. Now we're rushing on to networking. So keep the questions coming. Alrighty, networking. The statistics are consistent, and I'm sure you know this. I'm sure you've heard this before. 75 to 80% of jobs come from knowing somebody who knows someone. A sobering reality is that there are many jobs available that simply will not appear in job boards. These jobs are advertised through word of mouth or professional associations or company-related websites. So networking and informational interviews can really help the experienced workers, especially one who has not been on the job hunting trail for a long time. For example, let's say that you now want to make a career change and get into something you've never done before, or like I did during the Great Recession, you want to get back into something you haven't done for years. Now, the big question for us in that situation is, do I have the skills that will make me competitive? Now, the best people to give you that answer are the ones who are actually doing the work that you seek. Find those folks. Ask them to review your resume and give you candid feedback as to whether they think you are out of the box ready or whether you may need to update your credentials. This is what I've done when I wanted to get back into teaching, and I'd been out of it for a long, long time. I had a very candid talk with my mentor about what I needed to make myself more competitive. I knew I could do the job. That wasn't a question, but I needed to know how to communicate the fact that I could do that job to the people who were doing it. Okay? Another advantage to networking is you can find out about the jobs before they are posted. You know, insiders can sometimes share things like, well, okay, there's nothing in the department right now, but I can tell you they're budgeting for a position that it sounds exactly like you want to get into, and they're going to be letting you know more about that in, you know, August or something like that. And finally, more experienced workers are choosing to focus on a specific company or organization rather than waiting for the jobs to be posted. So think about a company that really interests you, or maybe a kind of company, a kind of organization. Research it thoroughly. Review your qualifications, especially the skills that you have that are going to be valuable in the current time of difficulty. Then reach out and meet them. It can be as simple as a quick phone call or an email. Let them know that you are simply opening the door for a possible relationship. You're not expecting them to create a position for you right away. Remember, the better and more positively you get to know them, the better chances of thought of when the next position opens up. I'm a big believer in informational interviews, and again, reach out to me if you want to know more about that because I've done them and they were a game changer for me in a very, very positive way. So, all right, I'm still speeding around like a freight train here, but hopefully the wheels are turning as you're thinking about all the things to take into consideration that have changed since the last time you looked for a job. Okay, what else has changed? Well, teleconferencing. So this is a big thing. Now, I've talked to many people in the past few months that, have expressed concern about actually doing an interview. Maybe they have Zoomed with friends and family, but they haven't done a lot of it. Number one, the good news is that you're doing it right now. I would suggest that if you haven't done a lot of teleconferencing during the pandemic, that you try to do so as often as you can, just so that you get used to it. Don't worry about not knowing their particular platform that they use. Remember, they're going to try to make it as easy as possible because it's not helping them if they have a complex system that they're going to have to fight through every time they have a new candidate. So it's going to be pretty easy. Okay, so the one bit of good news of teleconferencing is you're doing it now. So you've already got this experience behind. All right, couple of other tips, and I'm just going to be going by some really quick tips if you haven't interviewed. Again, this is interviewing. This is not going to be the informal stuff. Set up your background. Okay, so here's something that I actually know statistically. You know those fake backgrounds that you see? Maybe you've seen people, maybe you've used them yourself, where the background is all blurry, or maybe you're in front of a cartoon castle, or you're in front of the Golden Gate Bridge. They've actually polled employers. They don't like them. They really don't. And if you've seen somebody with a fake background, you know why. Because if you move around too quickly, half your head disappears and it doesn't look real great. So generally speaking, a rule of thumb is to have something behind you that's not terribly busy. Now, my background, sadly, is not the best, but this is my home office, so I don't want to change it. But there's a lot of stuff going on back there, and I don't want to have anything in the background that's going to be competing with me for attention. Generally speaking, a simple bookshelf, simple art on the wall, provided that it's something that's easy to interpret. Oh, look, it's a boat. Oh, look, it's a, pretty flower or something, as opposed to people trying to figure out, is that a cat or something like that? You know what I mean? So have the background simple. Choose good lighting. Okay, so right now I'm using some natural lighting. It's a little brighter in here today, thank goodness, but I do have a selfie light that helps as well. Why am I bothering to talk about this? Because if you are in silhouette, if you put yourself in front of a bright window, they're not going to be able to see you. They're not going to be able to see the expression on your face. They're not going to get a feeling for your personality. So that's why we bother going through this. Dress as you would face to face. And that includes wearing everything, the entire outfit, even down to the shoes. Why do I say that? I say that because of the psychological factor. Dressing as you would for an in-person interview will give you that mindset of the in-person interview, as opposed to dressing nicely from the waist up and then wearing shorts down below, okay? Even most important, make good eye contact and smile, okay? This is huge. I've actually experienced psychologically what happens when somebody remembers to look into the camera lens. I was sitting in a meeting very early on during the pandemic with a coworker, and he spent the entire time looking down at the screen. And all of a sudden, toward the end of the meeting, he looked up and looked directly into the camera lens. And it was like he was looking me in the eye for the first time. And it was like, oh my God, wonderful. I just made a human connection. So the important thing is that you are treating that camera lens like the face of the person you're speaking with, and you're making the eye contact with that person just as you would in a face-to-face situation. Audio. Now, I don't have time to go through all of the tips on audio because one of the things we discovered at Career Force here, just as we suddenly had to go and work remotely, is what works for one person doesn't always work for somebody else. Sometimes people use headsets like I'm using, other people use something else or a microphone. There's really no way of saying this is the best way to do it because it's different with everybody's setup. So I do encourage you to spend a little bit of time making sure that your audio is really, really good. And finally, the last bit of advice on this, and I realize I'm hitting really the high points here, but have a backup phone number handy. That's probably the best thing. Every now and then something goes horribly wrong. Things have gone horribly wrong with these webinars, and suddenly somebody has to back out and start in again. It's really good that you have a phone number for the person you're speaking with. So if something, God forbid, should go wrong, you can call them. Okay? All righty. So that's a little bit of quick nuts and bolts here, but the final thing that may have changed since you last interviewed is you. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a little bit of time to think about this. How do you feel about looking for employment now, and do those feelings show? Now, I've been doing some outbound calling for a special project we're doing at Career Force, and I've been talking to some people who have self-identified as in their 60s. And let me tell you, let's just say that how they feel about having to look for work at this point in their career showed, and it showed a lot. Okay. Now, if you're enthusiastic, and there are some people who are looking, very much at the bright side and thinking this is a great opportunity, in that case, it's fantastic to show your feelings. But if your feelings are negative, if you still have some emotional leftovers from your last employment or resentment about having to look now, this could be a problem. And I would personally recommend that you reach out to somebody in your life that you trust to be straightforward with you. Ask them if they're picking up on bitterness or resentment, or just they're sensing that you're struggling to move on from that last position. If they do, if they are picking up on that, feel welcome to reach out to us. We can help you find ways of talking about your current situation in a positive and effective way. Okay? Because that can be a real drawback. Coming in to a interview and showing that there's residual baggage can put you out of contention very, very quickly. Okay, evaluate your skills now. Now, we tend to focus on the things that we feel we don't have, but the other thing is you've accumulated many, many skills, both on the job and just plain living your life. Make sure that you're evaluating those as well and asking what makes you a better candidate today than you were the last time. What have you learned and gotten better at that maybe some of the younger employees haven't achieved yet? Okay? And finally, and we were just talking about this the other day, what are your goals? Now, here's the thing. This can be kind of tricky. They are almost certain to ask you about this, and it's going to be really important that you have a specific answer. They're going to ask you things like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now, your goal may honestly be to retire in 3 years. But I would advise you to work with us on how to answer that question carefully. You want to be honest, of course. I'm not suggesting that you make something up. But at the other thing is, remember, they're going to be laying out a lot of time and money and effort into you. They're probably not going to be as enthusiastic to bring in somebody who's saying, well, I hope to be out of here and out of lake. Do you see what I mean? So that is a tricky one that you kind of have to walk a careful line on that, okay? Alrighty. Now, before we get to the questions, what I want to do is I want to move on to the mistakes that employers tell us experienced candidates often make. Now, this is directly coming from employers, that this is what they're sensing or what they've actually experienced. The common stumbling blocks seem to be, number one, being seen as overqualified. You guys could tell me that, I'm sure. Losing momentum. Okay, starting out really enthusiastically, and then the enthusiasm kind of peters out. Letting your narrative be negative. I've talked about that before, kind of bringing in all of the bitterness and that kind of thing. And then finally, not updating your skills. Okay, so let's examine those quickly. Now, the most common reason candidates are perceived to being overqualified, frankly, is they've listed too many accomplishments on their resume, or they have listed accomplishments and skills that are not related to the job that is open. Now, I'm going to take a real life example here. A former restaurant manager who genuinely wants to obtain a position as a cook might be sending the wrong message if her resume includes accomplishments like reducing operating costs. Now, that is a fantastic accomplishment, and she's probably really proud of it. But the hiring manager might wonder if she's going to be tempted to offer advice to her boss about how the kitchen should be run. A better bet would be for her to focus on skills that are listed on the job description and not add other accomplishments achieved at a higher level. So I always tell people, whatever you put on your resume, think about how it could be negatively interpreted, just as you were thinking about how it can be positively interpreted. By the way, a skills-based resume would probably be best in scenarios like this. Now, if you are not familiar with the difference between a chronological and a skills-based resume, again, reach out to us because we will have time to go through that with you. And there are times when you want to make sure that your resume focuses on the skills and not necessarily on the chronology or gaps or things like that. Okay, moving on to the interview. It's important to remember that generations Millennial and Generation Z are the folks that might be interviewing you. It's important to understand what makes these folks tick, okay? Because you want to appeal to them. In general, and obviously there's exceptions to every rule, there's exceptions to us in our generations. But anyway, generally speaking, M and Z are highly collaborative and they're very team-oriented. So think about this, and this is actually taken from actual experience working with experienced workers. If you've been the boss for many years, it might really be easy to slip into boss mode and speak as you did when you were in charge. Now, that can come across as threatening or off-putting. Now, you might be like me. You might naturally speak with confidence, but sometimes confidence can be misunderstood as being someone who might not want to listen to teammates or consider their point of view. So it's a tricky line to walk. Again, mock interviewing is a great way of giving yourself a chance to practice listening techniques, looking for opportunities to communicate that you look forward to fit in with their established team. Okay? All right, I love it. The questions are coming in. I can hear the wheels turning from here in St. Paul. All right, we're moving along quickly to another biggie that people report can be a stumbling block in looking for work, just losing momentum. So one of the biggest challenges people report about looking for work is just running out of steam. Lots of people say, I start out with loads of enthusiasm and motivation and organization and goals, and then all of a sudden family commitments pop up, or frustration gets the better of me, or I just plain lose my drive. Now, if you're determined to obtain employment, make goals for yourself, absolutely, but also seek out a support network that will help you stick to your plan. I always recommend thinking of it as a marathon rather than a sprint. So just like a marathon runner needs hydration and fuel all the way through the race, you will too. You may snag a position, by the way, shortly after starting your search. That's great, but don't beat yourself up if you don't. Just the sheer numbers of people who are competing for jobs means that it will probably take longer. Things are challenging these days. It calls for endurance. So just think about endurance, okay? All right, we need a 50-plus support group. I agree in more ways than one. Okay. All right, we've talked about this a little bit. A common mistake is unintentionally coming across negative, and sometimes we do this without even realizing that we are being negative. It takes that other person to say, hey, did you hear what you just said there? So as I mentioned earlier, you may have some residual bitterness regarding a former employer. If that happens, seek assistance in finding truthful, neutral language to use when talking about them. If a new employer gets the impression that they're interviewing a really judgmental person who's just sitting there with a lot of emotional baggage, it's going to be natural for them to choose the other candidate who's excited and positive and enthusiastic about the new opportunity. But of course, again, you guys are real. You guys are already ahead of me. This is not to say that you create fake enthusiasm. They're going to spot that immediately. But what I always say is leave the baggage at the door. Focus entirely about your skills and your accomplishments instead. Be careful. Be careful with word choice. The words fired and laid off are not interchangeable. Laid off means you lost your job because your organization closed, restructured, downsized, moved, or there was no longer need for your particular position. A lot of people have been laid off due to COVID. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm still running into people who feel that the fact that I've been out of work because of COVID is somehow a mark on you personally. No, it's not. And I can tell you with confidence that employers understand. They're living in the world as it is right now. So you don't need to be ashamed about that. The word fired. Let's talk about a couple of times when maybe it was your bad, okay? Now, fired is very negative. I would suggest a more neutral term. If you want the official term, it's involuntary separation. And I would highly encourage you to overcome the understandable discomfort and work with our team as to how to talk about those times when maybe it was your bad. If you were fired, do not represent yourself as laid off because the employer doing a background check can discover the truth pretty quickly. Being fired, by the way, happens more often than you would think. And there are lots of ways that you can address it truthfully, but at the same time, minimize the negativity and move on. Okay, now this is an older slide that I keep telling myself I'm going to update, and I keep forgetting. I'm sorry. But this is not updating your skills. So if you've been employed with the same organization for 30 years, you have a solid set of skills that your particular organization needed you to have. However, when you go out to exploring other organizations, even let's say you're going to stay in the same industry, you may find that other skills might be needed. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes it's just not enough to be willing to learn. Think about it. A hiring manager has got two candidates. One candidate says, well, I may not have personal experience with this particular software, but I'm certainly willing to learn. But the other candidate says, yes, I've used this software for the past 3 years in my previous position, and here are my specific accomplishments with using it. Now, the importance that that hiring manager places on that particular software may determine who gets the job. Now, you may be interested in going back to work that you did many years ago. I did. That's what I did during the recession. Now, depending on the nature of the work, even a degree may not entirely be, what you need just to be qualified, okay? So, for example, someone may have obtained a degree and a teaching license back in the 80s. Ooh, that sounds like someone I know. But teaching is one of those vocations that tend to change every few years. If you haven't been in a classroom for a while, you will need to know what the current teaching approaches are, what the software that's being used is, and certainly today you're going to want to know how to bring dynamic, successful instruction to your classes remotely. So look at yourself realistically and say, where am where am I right now, and where do I need to be? And again, this is where the instructional, informational interviews help in talking to somebody who's currently in that particular position, and they can tell you what you need to do. Now, we can help in certain areas. Dislocated Worker Services is a great program to obtain licensures or certifications. Okay, so I highly suggest that you reach out and find out more about dislocated worker. It's not going to be able to help you with a 4-year degree, but it is going to be able to help you with a license or a certification program. I have a friend of mine from high school that I've used as an example for years. I'm now using him for another example, but a newer example. He lost his tech job owing to COVID. He went back to school and he is now a barber. So there are, radical changes. It doesn't always have to be a radical change. You can still maybe want to stay in your industry and not change that much, but you know that if you were to get this certification, if you were to have this license, it would just make you that much more marketable. Okay, so I'm going to flurry by the stuff that is older, and now, huh, I'm only 8 minutes over. Now, the second part of this is you guys. This is you guys directing the conversation about the things that you find most pressing. And this is where Marnie comes in and not only reads the curated questions, but probably helps me answer them.
Holy macaroni, do we have questions and
Yay!
comments and thoughts and ideas. I love the idea of a 50 plus support group.
I do, so do I.
And we have
Marnie and I'll get to
definitely,
that.
yes, we have definitely explained and reminded as we make these phone calls to people and as we do this particular workshop that this is a very important issue for a lot of people, and we need more curriculum about it. All right, so well, Robin is catching her breath. People asked about the slideshow. Yes, we will send that with the speaker notes tomorrow.
Yep.
We are recording today's presentation, so we plan to send the link out to the recording tomorrow. Someone said it sounds like we should update our resume for each job that we apply for. Yes, yes, you should be. And if you haven't done the resume workshops, please find those and listen to those again. I can try to put in some links there for you. Also personalize that cover letter, absolutely. Work from home. A lot of people have mentioned that it would be great. I would love to. I need to for several reasons. Is there a legitimate place to look for opportunities? I can certainly send out what I've sent to other people with the research that I've done in the past year.
You may want to
Robin,
look at
yeah,
glassdoor.com. And there's certainly other things as well. But Glassdoor, if you're not familiar with it, is kind of a repository for people going on and sharing their impressions of working with companies. And believe it or not, it's much more helpful than you may think. It's not just a parking lot for bitter former employees to vent. It actually, they're working very hard to make it legitimate and pros and cons as well. And a lot of things like these guys have moved mostly to at-home work will be included in things like that. So that is part of the research you will need to do about the companies that you are considering. And by the way, that's a great question. If you want to work from home, start research now. What are great companies in the Twin Cities where people are allowed to work from home? You're gonna need to dig. They aren't just gonna give you a list, but you will need
right.
to dig. But that's a great place to start.
Yes, absolutely. Robin, have you heard of Encore Careers? Because I had a very excited person say that career change is a fun idea for those of us who are 65 and older. I know I read a book a couple years ago about Encore Careers, about after you're done with your real career, you decide,
Hmm.
I want to do something completely different.
Absolutely. In fact, my friend Chris Farrell, I was joking at the beginning here. Marnie was having NPR playing in the background, and I worked for NPR for 10 years, and so I know a lot of the people there. Chris Farrell has kind of made this his focus. He's still working in his primary job, but he's talking about Encore Careers, and absolutely. And one of the things that apparently was really popular, at least a couple of years ago when he came to talk with Career Force, was people starting companies with their adult children, and starting really fun collaborations with things like I don't know, I think it was a brewing beer or maybe it was wine that that a father and a son started with. So yes, this can be a very meaningful thing that you do when you start looking at um, what makes me passionate. Quick question, or excuse me, quick example of this because it's such a cool example and I haven't shared it in a while. There was a nurse who had been, I think, 30 years or so on the job in a hospital, loved nursing still, hated the hospital bureaucracy, was burning out on that quickly. She did, kind of the question and answer with herself as to what really made her passionate. She determined that being outside gave her a great amount of pleasure, and so she got a job as an EMT for a national park. So think about that. Think about your skills and what you've done and see if it can be somehow combined with something else in your life that you love.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so one little more commentary from me, and then I'm gonna shoot Robin some rapid
She's gonna shoot
fires.
Robin.
Yep. Rapid fire questions. Get ready, watch out. Okay, so one person had put in just, should we take temporary jobs that only last for 2 months? And the answer is, we don't know. We don't know without talking to you. So that's why I've posted a couple times in the chat, please contact your local career force staff, have a more in-depth, extensive conversation about yourself, about what you've done, about where you want to go, and then we can provide you a little bit better individualized advice. All right, Robin, here we go.
Okay, all right.
What is the stable life stage? I think that was a term that you mentioned back with the Harvard study, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that because I can see where that would be like. What do you mean? I think what I mean by stable life stage is and I'm going to speak in general, okay? I realize that when we're talking age groups, we have to kind of generalize sometimes, and there's exceptions to every rule. But in general, and I'm the oldest Generation X, by the way, I missed being a baby boomer by 8 days. I was always taught that, you got a job and you stayed in it. That has been in my mindset. Not good or bad, it's just the way we were taught. Now, compare me with a millennial or a Generation Z, their mindset is not that. They are notorious. In fact, a few years ago, this is notorious for starting jobs and leaving very, very quickly because they found something more interesting. If an employer is looking for loyalty, and my guess is they really do want that right now, because it's expensive to keep changing over. What I mean by stable isn't necessarily emotional stability or anything else. It's stability in terms of you know what you're getting into, and you're willing to give them the commitment that you tell them you are going to give. Does that make any sense? That's kind of what I had in mind.
Yes. Yep, definitely. All right, also regarding the Harvard study, is this still true for those of us who are over 60?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, it depends upon your skills, but the point is, do you have the skills that they need? Beyond that, the age does not really matter for most people, unless they are very biased. And by the way,
Oh, Robin is frozen. For me. Oh, and now we've lost her connection. I am so sorry. All right, folks. Oh, there she's back,
okay. Gee, and
but
I was
still kind
making
of
such a
frozen.
good point. All right, can you hear me? All right.
Yes.
I'm going to try again. I'm going to
Okay.
try again. All right. So remind me again. I got all discombobulated and I don't know what I was saying. You want to repeat that again,
Um,
Marnie?
the Harvard study that you mentioned, is it still true for folks over 60?
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay.
Mhm.
So the job that I had right before this was in a millennial-led tech company. Nobody was more shocked than I when I was hired. The point is that I literally had skills that the people half my age did not have. Now, that doesn't make me a better person or a better employee. It means that I filled a gap. So the idea here, folks, is to be able to find that sweet spot where you are filling the gap with accomplishments and abilities that they don't have. And age becomes irrelevant at that point. The only time, oh, I know what I was saying. I was saying that you don't hear me talk a lot about age discrimination, not because I'm denying its existence. It does. But I also know it's extremely hard to prove. And I also know that I think, honestly, guys, this is my opinion, it's time better spent if you're going after the jobs that appreciate your skills and abilities than if you're knocking your head against the wall against age discrimination. Okay. Find a way of convincing them that your skills and abilities are what they need.
Absolutely. Just a clarification, folks are wondering returnships. What is that? Is it working for free?
No, well, I guess it depends on the individual company. Returnships are simply internships for people who are experienced workers. So it's probably going to be set up a little differently, knowing that it's not like a college student coming out with very little real world experience. It's an actual established, experienced worker taking one particular section of their qualifications and working on getting it up to speed. I honestly can't tell you how many companies actually have a formal returnship program. I just know that they have been successful in the past.
It's a word that I have set up an alert for on a couple of the sites that I have an alert system set up. So that's something you could do as well. Just put in return ship and ask it to email you every time something comes up with that. All right, Robin, I know you touched on this, but if you could kind of clarify again, how do you explain where you'll be in 5 years or 10 years when you honestly plan on retiring?
Yep. Yep, that can be a tricky thing. And again, just like Marty said before, I really encourage you to reach out to us and let us kind of flesh this out with you. We have to know your circumstances. We have to know the kind of job that you are going for, because a lot of times what job you go for is going to determine whether your answer is going to fly or not. If they are bringing on a director who needs to, you know, build the program and show enormous progress within 10 years, if they're looking at a 10-year span and you're planning on only being there 3 years, that may just not be a fit. That may just not be a great, fit. So first of all, number one, look at the kinds of jobs where maybe you could commit for 3 years and then go away. And then reach out to us and talk about, okay, how can I talk about this? So A, I'm not lying, I'm not telling them a lie, but B, I'm being truthful to myself and making sure that I keep my goals, my personal goals in mind. So I hate to sound like I'm being coy or hedging the question, but it literally does need us to know your specific situation to be able to answer that question.
Thank you. All right, back to the tea table. Someone says it's
Yay.
really, really good. It works great when you've got all the qualifications. But what if you are low on some of them? How do you use the table then?
Okay. So basically, we'll use the table the same way you always use the table. The table is simply exists to give you that idea of how well do I match the qualifications. Then, whether you pursue the job or not becomes a personal decision on your part. Okay. Some people are very glass half full. They're like, who cares? I'm going to go in anyway because I feel like I've got other things I can sell them on. Just be aware that if they're really locked into making those, it may not work. Rule of thumb, all of their required qualifications, usually they talk about required qualifications or minimum qualifications, and then preferred. Generally, again, generally speaking, they take the required pretty darn seriously. They certainly do if you work for the government. I mean, that's like ironclad. You need to have these, and if you don't show that you have them, you won't be considered. The preferred are the wiggle room. Okay, that's the area. So generally speaking, the rule of thumb is pay most attention to those required. And then again, it really depends. I mean, the worst case scenario is you go for a job where you're not particularly qualified for. They don't ask you to come in, or they ask you to do one interview and then you don't hear from them again. I mean, if you're fine with that being the outcome, go for it. Okay.
All right, there's several questions here about, my only education is graduating from high school. And if they ask me that question on the application, how can they do that? Isn't that unlawful? And how can I explain my experience and how it substitutes for not having a degree?
A big thing that I would say for that is research the company as much as you can. Going on to Glassdoor, asking people questions. There may be a legal, legitimate reason why someone needs to have at least a bachelor's degree. Okay. So don't always assume that because they say that they're doing it because they're trying to screen out certain people. Um, in a way, they kind of are. But I'm saying is there's kind of like legitimate questions. Somebody asked me, why is there ever a legitimate time somebody would ask how old you are? And I would say, yeah, if you're a bar, you want to make sure that a 16-year-old is not being hired. So there are times when the rationale behind this is legitimate, okay, where they actually do need to have a certain level of education or experience for their company. So a lot of times, you're going to need to do a little bit of research yourself to find out, okay, is there a legitimate legal reason why the stipulation is in this, or is this somebody's personal bias?
Right. Okay, and I'm just going to do another little plug here for PCs for People. Some folks have talked about just being able to join us on their phones, and that can be frustrating, or being able to do a video interview over the phone. So please check out PCs for People. You can get technology through them, and it is statewide. It's based in the Twin Cities, but all Minnesotans can use it.
Can I jump the line just a sec, Marnie?
Please.
Because I saw a
Yep.
question that just came in as you were talking, and I have the answer to this. They said something about, is there a list of companies that are hiring experienced workers? Yes, AARP has got what is called the AARP Pledge. And it's on their website, and it's basically they've been working for years with employers finding out which companies are specifically, it's not just that, well, yeah, of course we would hire, most companies would say that, but they're willing to actually take a formal pledge saying that, yes, experienced workers are important to us, and it's going to be a vital part of our working force. So the AARP Pledge, Google it, and you will get to a list, and yes, they have it divided by states. And I was pleased to say that Minnesota is well represented.
Excellent. That is a question I've been asked twice in the recent weeks with these calls we're making to folks.
Yeah.
All right, so specifically regarding rural opportunities, people are, in a rural area where they're seeing, construction, truck driving, waitressing, but, you know, they're struggling because either they're outside of a metro area and they believe their apps are being tossed aside. Um, and if someone has been, for example, an over-the-road trucker for almost 30 years, um, they have no idea what kind of job they could get hired for other than what they've done. So what advice would you have for them?
Couple of things. The first thing, which is short term, that you can do by yourself, provided that you've got access to a browser and a Wi-Fi connection. We have a assessment tool on our website, careerforcemn.com, that is a skills matcher. What you do is you put in what you have been doing, and it's going to spit out a list of all of the jobs that are very similar to that. You utilize many of the same skills. The list is going to be arranged according to the greatest matches are going to be on top. And then as you go on, the jobs they list are going to be similar, but maybe you need a little bit of training. And that's where you could combine possibly dislocated worker program to augment your experience with a license or a certificate and jump into that job. That's the quick one. That's the one that you could do right after this webinar if you wanted to do. The one that you may need to make an appointment for is to reach out to CareerForce, because that's what we do. That's the whole point, is that you got two brains working together on this. Set up an appointment and say, let's do some brainstorming as to what you can do. And not only what you can do, but also how do you communicate that well on a resume and in an interview situation.
Excellent. All right, so due to a head injury from a few years ago, someone has learned that they can't do what they had been doing. So what ideas do you have for them going forward with their career?
You know, I worked with a marvelous gentleman. I used to work for Goodwill Easter Seals as a vocational trainer, and I worked with a marvelous gentleman who sadly had received a traumatic brain injury. He had been a journalist. He was looking for customer service work at that particular point. So I would say, again, your particular situation is going to be really unique to you in terms of what are your limitations and what are your skills, because that will determine what it is that you can do. But again, I'll go back to the idea of reaching out to us because two heads are better than one. It may require a training program. It might require something like the vocational training that we have available in several places around the Twin Cities. It might simply be the dislocated worker program. We'll have to talk with you to get more specific information.
Yes. Yep. How do we not be ghosted after taking a couple hours to fill out job applications on a website?
Oh, I wish there was an easy answer to that. So I think what you're saying is you take 2 hours and you apply for this and then you never hear from them. Unfortunately, I can't think of one, and I'll defer to Marnie if she can, but I can't. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why, guys. In the interviewing class, I talk about a recruiter that we had back when we used to do job clubs in person. And we had a guest speaker who was a recruiter in a large healthcare facility in the Twin Cities here. And he was very honest about his method of weeding out after he would get thousands of applications for one job. He said he personally looked at the salary quote. And if the salary quote was too high, those people would immediately be eliminated. He didn't look at their education. He didn't look at their experience. He didn't look at their accomplishments. He literally did not know. All he looked at was that one number. Now that's horrible. Um, but you don't know. There's no way that we as applicants know what is the criteria they're using to weed people out. And sadly, ghosting is a reality, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. What I would say is when I was applying for work during the recession, my personal thing that I did is I always I called it keeping the pipeline filled, keeping the pipeline filled. I made a personal goal for myself that I applied for, God, I want to say 15. It's been a while, I don't remember, but I wanted to send out 15 applications a week. So I was constantly filling the pipeline. So when somebody said no to me or somebody I didn't hear from somebody and I was depressed, the point is I heard from at least another person that week. So I kept the pipeline filled and I kept the process going.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us.
We're done.
Yeah, it's
That
10:59.
went
It
fast.
just went crazy. Yeah, we could definitely do this for 2 or 3
Oh,
hours.
I'm all for the plus 50 group, guys. So send me your
Mhm.
ideas. We'll try to make it happen. No promises, but we try to make it happen.
Yes.
Marnie, as ever, it's an absolute joy. You guys will be hearing from me tomorrow. I'll send you the packet and we'll go from there, okay?
Yes,
Thank
let
you,
this be your
everybody.
springboard. Thank
You got
you.
it.
Thanks, Robin. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.